Hi there, I'm Chris from Airwindows, talking to you on December 29th, after Christmas, hopefully after all the other manufacturers have done their big elaborate Christmas things and gotten out of my way. And man, I gotta tell you, I am posting this after 4 hours of driving through rain and ice, or well, it would be ice if it was a little tiny bit colder than it was, to bring you a plugin. But I'll also tell you some of the stuff that I was up to. I have been exhausted catching up to some of the stuff going on. The noise you hear is my heater. I had to get fuel oil in, and if I sound any different, it's because I've also got a compressor in that I can study and model. I'm running a Heritage audio successor, and that is taking place on this microphone. So we will see whether that makes things sound better. I'm also super duper exhausted from getting through a bunch of family stuff, and which I did pretty good, honestly. People seem to be happy, and I got some things. For instance, this is a little bell. It is a little bell without a clapper, but it's a Christmas tree ornament, which I don't have Christmas trees. It doesn't ring very well. And those are my initials on it. I grew up with this thing around. That ain't all. I saw some of my family members and I got this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's mine, because this was my childhood Christmas stocking that my mom knitted for me when I was very little. And you got your little Santa on it and a little jingle bell on the bottom. And man, when we were little tiny kids, this would be the thing. So yeah, I've got that. Now you may ask, what do I have for you? Well, I was gonna have a update to Compress Saturator, and then I tried it and found out that it was still broken. That one has such a weird algorithm that it kind of flips out, and I thought I had it nailed, and then it turned out the VST was still giving me problems. So what we're going to do is skip ahead a week, because I had something else and it was going to give me a chance to rest, but I'll talk about that in a moment. I had something else in line, and I can skip ahead and offer you Baxandall. I was going to wait extra for this, just so that there was room for it. I think this is something that people might get a little excited about. It is inclined to be what I will end up building in to future channel strip like console developments that have a lot going on in them, because with just two controls and the output trim helps this one, I can get a lot of different sounds, and they all get the sort of Airwindows tone going on, because there's a cohesion to the sound you get off of this. And I can demonstrate that by playing some audio. And you'll notice that this time I have the audio turned up in the streaming software so you can hear what I'm doing. Yay! And this is what Baxandall does. I can turn the treble up or down. I can turn the bass down or up. And if I pad the output, I can get exaggerated. Here's a lot of treble. Here's a lot of bass. And here's a lot of both. So you can see, and I'm not, if you want to see its response, like run white noise through this into something like Baxandall span, I'm still not down with running lots of windows into the streaming at the same time. I'll work on that. There are many things I'm going to be working on in the beginning of the new year, but for now I'll tell you about it. Baxandall works like a real Baxandall EQ with this sort of gentle ability to slope. It's not really a tilt EQ, it's got a shelving thing going on, but I've also contrived to manipulate it in such a way where it doesn't simply act like a low and a high on a single crossover point. Instead, if you boost both, you'll get a bit of a dip. In fact, if you boost hard like this, you're going to get a funny little notch in the middle that goes away if you chill out the settings. And if you cut both, you wind up getting some of the mid-range still there. I can show you that. That's easy. So, back to flat. So we can get a very natural mid-rangey kind of sound here. And we can bring back in the bass if we want that. Or we can bring back in some treble. Or a little of both. And again, that's flat. When it's set to flat, it's very clean. The actual way the algorithm works, and I stripped it down to the treble and bass to make it perform better in this way. The actual way the algorithm works, if you've got it perfectly set, it is a low pass and dry subtracted by a low pass, canceling each other out. And in theory, if it's exactly on 0, you should get bit identical output. No lossage at all. That's how I think it should work, because it will translate into that behavior. The additive subtractive thing like that should cancel out to become literally, if it's on 0, there will be no tone consequence at all. But you can sneak some in. And as you start adding stuff like highs, it'll start bringing it out without pushing the mid-range on you, without like making the slope start pushing mid-range frequencies. It's sort of tilting and moving and adjusting in such a way that, here, we'll pad it. You can bring in as much of the highs as you want, and as you push it farther, it starts exaggerating it in a peculiar and characteristic way. To the point where if you double exaggerate it, by say giving all highs and killing all the bass, you can wind up with something that doesn't sound like a Baxandall anymore at all, because it is too extreme, but it's still available within the settings. So this is your like hats and symbols and things, if you want to just hype the hell out of it with still a natural quality. This is cranking that out super loud. And you can hear it kind of going away again, or boosting again. And then the opposite is you can boost the bass to the expense of everything else. So if you wanted to take a track and have that just emphasize all the lowest bass and wipe everything else, but in a very sort of phase coherent way that's not all synth filtery, this is a natural approach to that situation. And there we are back with a rock and roll thing. So let's play with this a little bit. So that's basically dry, or pretty close to it anyhow. That's what it sounds like to boost real hats. And we can do a crazy mid-range suck-out thing, because again, the way this works, oh, is it going to go to the, I guess it is. It'll go back to the synthesizer. Fair enough. Tell you what, we can tell it not to. So we get a mid-range dip by boosting everything that much, making a smiley curve. And we can move it around a little bit by fiddling with where we're placing that boost. You pull it back, and the dip area is going to pull back a little bit as well. It'll go lower in frequency. And if we pull the bass boost back as well, the dip area kind of goes away. and it goes to much more flat. So this type of EQ is what people normally use as a mastering EQ, and you can see why when you do less extreme boosts. Let's go back to the beginning of that again. So this is essentially natural, but if I'm not happy with how much bass there is, I can bring that out if I want. And if I'm not happy with how it balances with the mids, I can sneak a little bit of highs in there as well. But the whole thing is still functioning in a very natural way. It doesn't sound unnatural. It's not taking frequencies and throwing them all over the place. We can roughly level match it. In fact, that's a 5 and 3. So if I pull it back, like our 5.4, and just consider that to be the amount, because this is labeled in dB. That's our raw signal. And we've just reshaped the whole tonality of it while keeping it consistent in volume. And if that's too exaggerated compared with the dry signal, we can go back to full volume and be just a lot more subtle with it. And there's our dry. See what I mean? So with Airwindows Baxandall, you can do the crazy extreme EQ moves. You can take individual tracks in a mix and do like this is all the bass or this is all the treble, or to some extent both, and just do silly extreme EQ moves, or you can do very subtle EQ moves that are still effective. In the spirit of how a Baxandall filter works, which is essentially just very gentle slopes, like gentle things that we do with it are super chill. And when we start pushing it to the extremes, that's when it gets a little weirder. It was very tricky to set up. I'm just happy that it works for the VST version. Again, I have fixing to do on the compress saturator, which I thought was working fine. But that only means I'm reversing the position of those two things. And my stocking stuffer for you is this new equalizer that's likely to find its way into stuff that I do. But you know, here it is now, and it is using what I did on the failed video that you couldn't hear, the biquad 1/2, and this is using interleaved biquad filters crossed over around the mid-range. The reason it acts so weird is that the offset points of the filters, which are still fairly slow filters, are shifting to make a comparable volume at 1K or thereabouts when you move the things. So it starts throwing the crossover points, moving them around to the point where you can do that crazy exaggerated stuff, which I think is going to be real helpful for people who are taking individual tracks in a mix and being like, this should be all about the highs. Well, you can do that in a way that still comes off natural. And you can make it very unnatural and exaggerated, but it's still going to more or less feel Baxandall-y rather than elaborate state variable filter with lots of Q. And by the same token, if you need to just subtly adjust things, this is probably going to be the one for you. I don't think anybody else has anything quite like it, because Baxandall is one thing. It mostly describes just the filter slope. But this is using not only the Airwindows filters, that are already unusual biquads, but it's using interleaved biquads, which nobody else does because it's kind of insane, but it worked. And the shifting of the filter positions, I just feel like this is a really approachable one. And I was going to wait a little bit so that I could maybe give it to you in the first thing of the new year and make that be very exciting. I'll just have to hope I can get Compress Saturator 2 fixed, and that will be just as exciting. Because the thing about Compress Saturator 2 is it's like the scariest, most badass loudinator you're ever going to find. With a sort of delta function where you can listen to what it's doing, which is useful for a Compress Saturator because it behaves in a strange way. And it's useful to be able to hear what it's changing. And then use that compression to saturation slider to just start pushing the intensity of things as stuff gets louder and louder and louder. But that's for later when I get it fixed. I do also have the secret project in store. I'm not sure where that's going. Again, I've had a lot going on, so I'm really kind of wrecked by now. And for that reason, I am kind of refocusing on just getting the plugins out. You may be able to see the stream time thing gradually getting more and more minutes of live streaming, but the sign just above it basically says, okay, we're doing the plugins, I'm doing my question and answer, anything else we'll see. Because I gotta rest up and I gotta refocus on getting these plugins into your hands so that they're working super well. And even if it involves introducing a lot of technology, which sometimes is bulky and awkward and strange, I'll put the effort into getting that stuff right. And once I've done that, I'll start exploring what else I can bring in the new year as far as re-exploring what kind of stuff, what kind of streams, what kind of tutorials or lessons I can give you with this sort of thing. I'll see how that goes. So if it turns out that Baxandall is one of the plugins here, and I'm done listening to it for now. If it turns out that Baxandall is one of the plugins that you would buy for $50 because it is a killer EQ that has a great tone to it, then you are welcomed to scamper over to my Patreon and put an additional $50 a month in my stocking. I know that before my mom died, she was very proud that I was making that work. She's not there anymore, although I do have the stocking that she made for me right here. And I'm very grateful that you guys were there for me so that she could see stuff working out for me before she passed on. But yeah, so if Baxandall works super well for you and you would have bought it at $50 a pop, which is pretty good for infinite perpetual license, full support, oh, and you get the source code. I give you kind of a lot for these plugins. If you would have paid $50 for that, please feel free to run over to the Patreon and throw another $50 or so per year my way. If I have done nothing when 2021 comes around, you can take it back away again. But I feel like I probably will have done at least one more plugin or something else worth your while by then. We'll see. Signs point to probably. And so with that, I'm going to shut off the compression, like the real compression, as in the hardware compressor that I can fool with and study and learn how it works. And I will bid you good night and finish up posting this plugin and make myself some dinner, even though it's getting really, really, really late. And unless my house gets flattened by ice and rain and so on, I will see you folks tomorrow for my Monday question and answer live stream. And if you have questions about Baxandall, I'll answer them. And if you have questions about Compress Saturator 2, I will say, I don't know what's broken with it. I just started using it in Reaper here, and all of a sudden only one channel was cutting out and it wasn't working properly. So we're gonna fix it, and I will do my level best to do that. But you're gonna have to get that another week. I was gonna give that to you this week in Baxandall next week, and that's being reversed. Thank goodness I had 2 in store, otherwise I'd be probably up all night trying to fix stuff, and I don't have anything in the tank left for that. But give me a week and maybe I will. In any case, it's been a real interesting year. It's been a kind of a rough year in a lot of ways. But that said, it's been a real interesting year, and it's been exciting getting through it with you all. And I will, let's get the interface ready. Boop. I will talk to you later. So good night, and thank you very much. Thank you for being here with me. Bye-bye.